kusoo dhawaada programka Institute Integrative Nutrition maajalka koowaad 2 cajal oo kamid ah sida dhageysanayna waa programna anfacayo bulshadeena Soomaaliyeed siiba aad u noo anfacayo wadamada qurbaha dadka joogo wadankii kuwa joogo dhinac walba uu qofka online ku qaadan karo haduu arday rabo inuu noqdo haduu rabo programka inuu gato uu gadan karo adii si daaraya kusoo dhageysta.
Life is about change. It's always day and night and winter and summer and everything's changing, and yet people are sometimes afraid of change. Oh my God, what's going to happen? And do you ever feel like you are already on the perimeter of society? You know, like here's the mainstream, and then you're over here, and then you do this program, and you're and people have a desire to fit in, especially in America, melting pot, fit in, and but I'm telling you, if you think it through, if you're already at the perimeter, there's no way you're going to ever fit in. You're going to be more on the outside, and it's okay to fit out. You know, the people who we love and are curious about are the people who don't fit in. They have their own life, and you want to know what are they doing this week or this month, and you have an opportunity to be one of those people, a healthy, vibrant one of those people. The people, rather than, you know, with your neighbors, and you try to like pretend like you're your neighbors and fit in and things, and I just encourage you, because you will be changing a lot during this coming year in whatever way is comfortable for you. But you don't have to be in the closet about who you are. You don't have to fit in and try to be like them. It's fine to be like, you know, I'm into this health thing and this is the future, and if you ever need anything, I'm here, and you can do that in your neighborhood, in your children's school, in your work environment. You want to be the go-to person for the change that is about to happen. You will feel better about it, and your career will thrive as a result of being visible. How many of you feel like you try to like stay not so visible about this because you've been attacked too much? What I'm asking you to do is make this leap from trying to maintain a low profile to maintain a high profile, and say, you know, this is the future. And in spite of the oppression that you have gotten your whole life for being different, to have pride in who you are and what you're about, because that will be what carries this ripple effect out into the world.
inshallah cajalkii koowaad oo maajalkii koowaad wali ku jirnaa maanta cajalkii koowaad waa sii wadanaynaa aad buu noo anfacaya programkan Institute Integrative Nutrition oo program aad u wanaagsan oo naga caawinayo afarta shay uu programku ku saabsan yahay waxa waaye mental, emotional, spiritual, physical. afartaas qofku waa inuu iska soo dhisaa marka programkana afartaas shay uu ka qaybsan yahay plus nutrition plus holistic health.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I call healthy deviance, which is more or less the same thing as fitting out. It's like, how do you do this thing, being a healthy person in an unhealthy world? I think it involves rule breaking. So I'm going to start by talking out what is healthy deviance in the first place. So the word deviant scares people. Deviant is one of those nasty words that we've applied to people that have broken societal rules. We don't quite trust their ne'er-do-wells. But in fact, the word deviant is very much a neutral term. It really just means somebody who their behavior differs from the societal norm in the society that they are in now, and that their attitudes, their perceptions can often be different. It's worth noting that many of our greatest leaders have themselves been deviants. Many civil rights heroes, you know, if you think Jesus Christ would have been considered a deviant at his time for asking for different norms. So a healthy deviant in my mind is just somebody who willingly defies the unhealthy norms of our culture in the service of their own health and vitality, and potentially the vitality of others. So one way to think about healthy deviance is just as a form of inspired noncompliance. You know, it's not going against the grain just to be difficult. It's going against the grain for the purposes of elevating your life and those of you around, those of the people around you. So how do we get to a place like this where this many people are struggling? This is more a short form graph of all of human history. And what you see on the bottom is a line representing from the dawn of man, basically up to the agricultural revolution of about 10,000 years ago. But worth noting is that this is not at all drawn to scale. And if the line at the bottom really represented 2.5 million years, it would go through this building, it would go about 55 feet further that way. The length of a school bus and a half, probably. So it's a very long time that we lived in a very consistent environment, right? We had hunter-gatherer societies living in small communal tribes, dependent on each other for their survival, eating nothing but whole foods because that's all there was, respecting the rhythms of light and dark. So for 2.5 million years, we lived this way. And then, boom, 10,000 years ago, we get the agricultural revolution. Suddenly, we're storing food. We have access to a surplus food available year-round. We live in, now we start moving to villages and cities. Everything about our way of life changes. And 10,000 years ago is not that long by human history standards. It's a blink of an eye. But that change started an exponential and very kind of follow-on train of even more significant changes, including the Industrial Revolution of about 200 years ago, factories and power from fossil fuels and steam. Then the Technological Revolution, that's like computers and the electronic stuff that we have, the flotsam and jetsam of our appliances and things. And the Technological Revolution was about 60 years ago. Then, only about 25 years ago, we had the Digital Revolution, which brought all of these computers into our hands and into our lives on a daily basis. So we are quite literally the very first generation in the history of all of that humanity to be living the way that we're living now. It's not any wonder that we're struggling, right? But it's also true that we are a living experiment. So we are figuring this out on the ground as we go, and we should probably give ourselves a little credit. It's like a hard thing to do to go against your culture, and particularly when your culture is opposed to your DNA. This is called evolutionary mismatch, when the DNA of 2.5 million years runs smack into a modern culture that asks you to adapt right now. So I'm offering you a way of seeing what is effectively an unseeable situation unless you decide to wake up and look at it. And we live in a culture that likes to put the big billboard out and tell you what is wrong with you. You have a rash. You are the wrong weight. You are the wrong size. You are the wrong color. You have not right enough money. You should have different clothes. You should have wrong style of clothes. And while we're so busy trying to comply with what our society is telling us is inadequate about us, we're becoming more and more overwhelmed. But nobody ever really shows you what's going on behind the scenes that produced all of this. So it's like the forest for the trees, right? We're so busy looking at the trees of our own symptoms, we don't get past that and see this bigger picture that I'm talking about, where what is wrong with us is actually a natural byproduct of living in the unhealthy default reality. And the unhealthy default reality is a natural result of the evolutionary mismatch that we've been experiencing. And that came from a history well beyond our control with an agricultural revolution and a bunch of other stuff. And all of it is nested in the programming of our very cells, our DNA, which has its own instructions, its own rhythms, its own intelligence. So we are up against it. And why does all of this matter in the first place, right? Beyond our own personal health, we all want to feel healthier. It's not for the reasons we're told. I believe truly health is the first human freedom. The minute you lose your health, think about all the things you can't do. Think about all the choices that go away. Think about the resources that get sucked in to your health crisis and the resources of your family and friends. What are your career opportunities now? What are your school opportunities? What are your family experiences like? So health is additionally, beyond the freedom, health is the thing that drives our capacity the most. If you wake up every day full of energy and excitement and enthusiasm and like go-getting, you're gonna go out and do some amazing stuff, and you can keep doing it. If you lose your health, you don't feel that way, and anything you begin you can easily lose momentum on the minute your health crisis flares. So I'm just going to tell you a tiny little bit about my own story, my own healthy deviant hero's journey, and how I came to be the weird way that I am. So this is a picture of me and my mom in about 1968. My mom is pregnant, and you can see she's smoking. So that was... I sometimes like to think, like, what might I have done if my mother hadn't blown my brain up with cigarettes? So my parents were kind of strange people. My mom was kind of a hippie mom, back to the land, kind of farmer type. My dad was a sociologist. And both of my parents raised me to really believe that I could do whatever I wanted and do it my way. They wanted me to challenge the culture. I also lived in an interesting era where experimentation was kind of the thing. The late 1960s and early 70s, rock and roll. There were psychedelic drugs. I didn't do those, particularly when I was 3 years old, but you know what I mean? Like, it was like back to the land and natural and organics, and then there were to the moon, and there's so many things happening. It was just kind of all bets were off. There weren't that many rules. And then to top it all off, my mother moved us to kind of an organic hippie commune in Wisconsin when I was about 5. So we built our houses out of old recycled materials. We tore down things. We had our own homemade food. We grew our own organic vegetables. We were outside all day. There were no televisions. And this was probably the healthiest upbringing that you could hope to have as a kid, right? Like, great, I got it made. No, because what happened was that I went to school. And when I went to school, I got schooled really quickly on how weird we were. Oh my gosh, people didn't want to sit next to us on the school bus. People did not want to talk to us at the lunchroom. I mean, we got asked questions and then we got bullied or ignored. So I figured out if I wanted to be a successful person, I needed to fit in. I needed to start following along with the prescriptions for what it looked like to be a successful woman in our world. And I looked to all of the traditional guides, the conventional guides for guidance first. Health and fitness magazines were the primary ones. And I will point out, not always realistic expectations, right? 860 moves for a hot upper body, which kind of makes you wonder how many does it take to do the lower part? I cannot even imagine. But I tried to do this stuff. You know, I tried to follow the diets. I tried to do the workouts, the 860 moves for an upper body, a hot upper body, and it kind of started breaking me down. And I held myself to such a high standard of wanting to look right and be right and achieve the right things and do the right stuff that at some point I couldn't keep up. And in a moment, one day, of being overly hurried and feeling really unsatisfied with everything that I had going on, despite all of my best efforts, I got really frustrated with myself. And in a little hissy fit moment, I stomped my foot and broke it. Broke the bone in my foot. And how many people have ever broken a bone here? Yeah. Do you know the sound that it makes? Were you aware of the sound? It's a horrible, horrible noise. So I fell on the floor crying and screaming, and then after a while I had to commando crawl over to the phone to call my dad to get him to pick me up and take me to the emergency room. And I had a moment to think, and 3 thoughts crossed my mind. The first one was like, oh my goodness, I just broke myself. Literally broke my body, in my skeleton. That is scary. And the level of violence that I was capable of directing at my own body, capable of breaking a bone, that was a cautionary moment for me. The second thought that struck me was like, you know what? This is not new. I have been breaking myself. Not just today, not just this month, but for years I have been trying to do all of these things, diets and exercise and my body image and night sweats, and I had all of these problems. I'd been breaking myself down and I'd been in denial of it. The third big thing that I thought about is that I'm not alone. Every person around me was having the same sets of problems, right? Rashes, pulling their hair out, picking at themselves, weight problems, hormonal problems, inflammation problems, diagnoses. They were adding drugs to their regimen every week, getting acupuncture and massage to try to keep inflammation down, but really hard to get ahead of it. So the fact that I wasn't alone made me go, well, maybe it's not just me then. You know, maybe this really is a societal problem. And I would invite you to ask yourself this question, and maybe ask this question of your clients, or consider that, your coaching clients. It's like, are you breaking yourself? And maybe the more accurate question would be like, how are you breaking yourself? Because most of us are right now. On some level, we're pushing a little too hard. We're under recovering. So this is just kind of a short form description of what happens in our culture to kind of help you wrap your head around it visually. The automatic default choices at 12 o'clock are what get us going down this road. That's what's produced by the unhealthy default reality. Then the unhealthy default reality naturally produces unhealthy default reality problems like overweight and chronic disease and rashes and all of that. Then it also presents the solutions. 860 moves for a hot upper body. Take this drug, ask your doctor if it's right for you. Here's a juice detox that you can do for $450 a month or whatever it is. So you get the solutions, then you start trying to do this thing, whatever the diet is, and sometimes they're like good things like Whole30s, but you try and you fail. You try and it doesn't work. You try and you get interrupted. And you go through enough of these attempts, probably hemorrhaging money and resources and time. And at some point you do start to blame yourself. You're like, it must be me. I must be weak-willed. I must just be a bad person. So you go to shame, blame, inadequacy, then into ego depletion, which is basically that idea that willpower is a depletable resource. You depleted all of your resources trying to follow a diet, and then you walk out on the corner and there's the Cinnabon factory or whatever it is. Now you have diminished capacity and you're set up. You're more vulnerable, more reactive, more likely to make terrible decisions. And that leads to overwhelm and depression and the poor me mindset, which is how I felt when I broke my foot. Poor me, until I realized that I was not alone. And that, of course, makes you more vulnerable to more automatic default choices. Once you become aware that this is going on, you have a better shot at interrupting it. Once you learn to take better care of yourself, you have more power. And once you have more energy and power, you can make more thoughtful decisions about the media that you want to consume. What do you need and want to learn? HCTP is a great example of continuous growth and learning. And then comes the experiments, right? Because of bioindividuality, we got to find out if what we're learning actually works for us. Do all that stuff, you end up with more autonomy, more resilience, more vitality. You end up a healthy deviant, and the whole thing gets better. But how do you do this thing? So a couple quick things. These nonconformist competencies I describe as amplified awareness. First of all, you have to stay aware and awake enough to know this is happening. You have to be aware of what's triggering your unhealthy choices and aware of what your healthier choices are. Preemptive repair means getting ahead of the damage that is done to us just by virtue of living in an unhealthy society. I say we live in a pro-inflammatory society. Everything about it, the stress, the food, the triggers, if you don't know that's coming at you and you don't take proactive, preemptive steps, you will become a victim of it. It's just a matter of time. So the third piece I mentioned, continuous growth and learning, can look like a lot of things, but I think of it first and foremost as a beginner's mind. Every day, every year, there will be new challenges. It's not like you get this and you're done. I've been doing this like a health journalist for 25 years. I find new things out every single day, and I have to experiment again with, does this work for me or not? So remember that the skills of the healthy person are not just diet and exercise, right? It's not just about secondary food and burning calories. It's about all this other stuff that we are not taught in our culture around sleep and stress and social connection, but also financial management and a bunch of other stuff. Where do you begin? In my mind, you got to start at this strange little intersection of all of the world's possible healthy priorities for you and what you're actually energized to do now. The world of healthy choices, your priorities, there's a little overlap, find that and start working there and encourage your clients to do that. What worked for me, interestingly, was not the diet and exercise route. I did a lot of that and it wasn't all that helpful. It made me crazy, honestly, the 860 moves for a hot upper body. But I did find taking a few minutes in the morning for myself before the world comes at me. I get up, I light a beeswax candle before I turn my phone on, before I turn the TV on. That's a ritual. And then having a nighttime wind down ritual. Some people call it like a digital sunset, where you turn the lights down, you bring the volume of your music and other sounds down, and you start preparing your body mind for rest before you go to bed. I like to get a little cup of hot water and start walking around with it in my hand because it keeps me from doing other stuff. But I stop working, about half hour, 45 minutes before bed. It really helps because everything in nature works according to these like gradual oscillations, up and down, and in cycles. And that's one of the pieces that is programmed into our DNA that we ignore at our peril. Because we've been told we're supposed to work like this, right? Get up, go, 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 and then boom, fall asleep perfectly like a baby at 11 o'clock or whatever it is. Doesn't work that way. So I want to remind you that when we live within this unhealthy default reality, this unhealthy society, it is constantly denying the reality of our very DNA. it is also depleting our capacity on a daily basis. From the moment we wake up and try to go, we're losing steam because we're not replenishing ourselves enough. And consciousness, it depletes our awareness so that we go out there kind of like, I don't know, and eventually we just are left completely at the victim. We become victims of the society. So bottom line, we live in a society that's setting us up to fail. That's kind of a bummer. The bright side is we got you people out there challenging a lot of these norms and encouraging the people around you to do it differently.
maasha allah intaasuu noogu egaya cashirkii maanta labadii cajal oo ku saabsanaa maajalkii koowaad weli maajalka koowaad aan ku jirnaa ka faa'iidaysta Soomaaliyay badanaa waxaan fiirsanaa waxyaabaha maalayacniga oo waxna noo tareenin aakhiri adduunbo markaan cajaladahan waxaa idinku soo gelinaya inaad ka faa'iidaysataan xag adduun xag aakhiro aad wajigaraysaan intaas idinku soo gabagabeynayaa inta maajaladan wadana aniga ma soo galayo insha Allah marmar waa laga yaabaa inaan soo galo YouTube-kayga inta kala cashiradan ayaan wadaa ku soo dhawaada ka faa'iidaysta wixii su'aalaha commentiga igu soo qora wabillahi tawfiiq